Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
I'm looking forward to this talk too. Darlene began studying at the San Francisco Zen Center in 1970 and was lay-ordained in 1974. She currently leads 2 regular meditation groups and is a practice leader at Zen Center. She has a book out, Arthritis, Everyday Exercises for Body and Mind, which offers instructions in using the tasks of everyday life for healing chronic illness. This is kind of old bio, so your second book, Suffering and Delight, is that out now?
It will be, but actually that's sufficient. To go on would be embarrassing.
Oh, okay. Well, she did have another book coming out called Suffering and Delight. And so, with that, I'll turn it over to Darlene.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So this morning I'd actually like to talk about my favorite thing about Zen practice, or my favorite thing right now. You know, it switches all the time, but my favorite thing right now that I've been thinking about is how practice, not just Zen practice, embraces paradox. And that's the moment-to-moment intermingling of things that supposedly don't go together. Seeing contradictory notions as just 2 parts of the very same thing. And so why do I like paradox so much? Well, it's because when you encounter paradox, things that are logical and rational are subverted. Paradox slips underneath all the things that are in their place, that are neat and orderly. All the ideological socks that are arranged according to color and style and put in the drawer in different compartments. Well, paradox subverts all this neatness and presents you with life as it usually is, very messy and gushy. Ideas flowing in and out of each other without any warning. And just knowing that this unruly realm exists when I'm walking my linear plank, ready to trip at any moment and be engulfed by this unruliness. It makes me relax a little and just let things be how they are. Not that I relax a lot. But I think from this perspective, I think it's funny, actually, that we see consistency as a good thing, that we try to be consistent. We try to get our ideas in order so they don't contradict each other. And I question the value of this exercise. I spent many years of my life trying to be consistent, to be the same way in this situation as I was in that situation. And I tried to develop a consistent self because people seem so alarmed when you're not consistent. And I remember my college roommate complaining to me that sometimes I was super neat and sometimes I was very messy, and therefore she didn't know how to conduct herself. And she said I was inconsistent, and this bothered her a lot because she didn't know how to play off it. She used herself as a paragon of virtue in this matter, saying that she was always messy. So I just conceded the point. Then when I was in a radical political group in my 20s, I was expected to have clear, solid, immutable opinions. In some circumstances, I was against the death penalty, and sometimes I wasn't. Sometimes I thought we should kill the pigs, and other times I thought just thinking that way was counterproductive. try as I would, I couldn't squeeze all of myself into one single self that when confronted with different moments in time was always consistent, always the same. Life just seemed too complex to me. But since other people always pointed this out as a huge character flaw, I thought for a long time that it was too. And then later on, a few years later, when I experimented with various psychedelic drugs and got to know the nonlinear realm in a really compelling way, I had new respect for the constantly shifting nature of things and what makes things shift. And so I gave up finally on consistency altogether. And then sometime later, not very long from that time, I ran across Carl Jung's remark that consistency is the mark of mediocrity. And that made perfect sense to me. Because, of course, if you try to squish all of yourselves into a single casement like a sausage, then, of course, you have to chop off all the ornamental edges, all the designs, all the curlicues, if you will, to make it fit in that casing. And then you don't have the benefit of all that complexity, some of which is merely entertaining or merely ornamental, but a lot of it is the stuff in you that's resonant with any particular situation that you encounter. So I think it probably helps me to ventilate the airless cubicles that are my personal opinions. I think it helps to ventilate those cubicles by realizing that things that appear to be different from each other are actually usually and always can be aspects of the same phenomenon. And so you have to, if you're going to look at things this way, ask yourself the question, what makes things different from each other in the first place? What makes you all different from the wall? Now that I'm perceiving, what makes the black cushion different? What makes you different from you? What makes Snake different from you? So what does make things different from each other? Well, we, perceiving beings, assign differences in values to things. And we pick out the stuff we're going to pay particular attention to at any particular time according to our desires and our fears in that particular situation, according to our attractions or our aversions in any particular situation. Then we differentiate things and assign values. And this picking out particular things to want or to run away from is what creates all of our problems. It's not necessary to pick out anything in particular. Suffering is delight. Delight is suffering. There's suffering in delight. There's delight in suffering. It's all mixed up together. We call things by different names so that we can talk about them. But our actual experience is not so easily reduced. For instance, if you're making love to someone and you are delighted by them, but you think you know that they're going to leave you soon. You can just feel it. Or you're going to leave them soon. You know that. You've made that decision. So that's suffering present in delight. They're intermingled. And I give workshops, a lot of workshops for people in pain. In fact, I brought flyers for one I'm giving next week. But in these workshops, I have people, one of the things we do is we pair off, and people tell someone else about their suffering. And usually when people do this, while they're telling about all the terrible afflictions of their life, they suddenly feel very light and joyous because this person has been assigned to listen to them. They actually can tell someone about their suffering for a certain amount of time. And it's actually embarrassing how joyful you feel talking about your suffering in this way. So that's when joy penetrates suffering. So these things are not clean. If you stick to your experience, then you can't actually use categories that way. So we operate by maintaining categories of things, but when we understand how profoundly those categories are based on our own desires at the time, we can shake up our categories at will. We can make them bleed into each other, whatever the situation calls for. And this is a very important aspect of living your life if you wish to live it fully. If you have an idea of the kind of life you'd like to be living, and you see it as very different from the life that you're actually living, in order to live fully, you have to diminish your clinging to your ideal life and turn toward the life that you actually have. For instance, it's very difficult for us to have a strong, functional body replaced by a helpless, weak one. Whether through calamity or through aging, whatever. It shakes us to our very identities to have that happen. But eventually, if you're going to have happiness in your life at all, you have to say, this is the life I have, and let go of your ideas about your life and turn your creative attention to this life that you actually have. For many of us, when we first come to practice, we have an idea of what practice is and how we should live up to that ideal, whatever it is. We aren't so interested when we're new to practice in what we will be interested in later, which is what is our specific suffering, what are the specifics of it, and what are our inherent tendencies that make our life so difficult. We just want to be a good practitioner at the beginning, just a successful spiritual seeker. So we hear often in Buddhism or Zen, Vipassana, we hear the ideal of the empty mind. And so we want to accomplish that ideal. So we try to empty our minds of their concepts and our bodies of their emotions. We impose our ideal on top of what is already here. We don't really notice much what's already here. We're too busy trying to mush down something over here, prop up something over here, in order to make ourselves look to ourselves like our ideal practitioner. And then some teacher comes along and says, start where you are with your ancient twisted karma, your obnoxious habits, your busy, anxious mind, and we're surprised. We were busy suppressing our nasty selves and puffing up our good selves, our admirable selves. It's a real turning point in practice when we realize that Zazen points us beyond any ideas of what practice should look like, and we begin to notice what's already here, what's already in front of us. And when we do notice what's already here, that our practice is right here in the selves that we are, we understand then that one conceptualization or another is totally inadequate to capture the vastness of our human lives. So we don't believe in the solidity of anything that we see or think about. But we also don't take a stand in the emptiness of anything that we see and think about. Those ideas have to disappear, and it's just this. Following Nagarjuna's example, we neither impute absolute meaning in the things we see and think about, nor do we impute no meaning at all in the things we see and think about. And this is how I understand what we call in Buddhism the middle way. It's not so interesting to interpret the middle way as midway between two extreme points. Traditionally, the 2 points, the 2 extremes, are referred to as hedonism and asceticism, or emotional indulgence on one hand and emotional suppression on the other. But the middle way is not the average. It's not the average way. In fact, the middle way is often referred to in texts as nowhere standing. Nowhere standing. You don't hang out in the bland, colorless middle. And you don't hang out in the extremes. You don't hang out anywhere, really. Sometimes you choose this behavior, this action, this point of view that you have, and in other situations it's that action or that point of view that's already a part of you. You choose. You have all these options. If you can see yourself clearly, you have a lot of options, and you choose them in different situations. For example, in this age-old extreme between hedonism and asceticism, you can have both. You can have it all. If you sign up for a 7-day sesshin, a long sitting, you will be an ascetic monk. You will not eat anything but what's served to you, the simple food that's served to you a couple times a day. You will not do anything except follow the schedule of zazen and lecture and more zazen and walking meditation, or whatever meditation the retreat offers, and the chanting. And all your standing and walking and sitting and lying down will be prescribed by the schedule rather than your preference. So this is a very ascetic way to live. And you can do that for however long a time you choose to do it. And there's no difference during that time between you and an ascetic somewhere in the caves. So then, some other time you can go to your sister's wedding and get as drunk and eat as much and dance as much as anybody else there. In fact, if you choose to be ascetic at your sister's wedding, everybody will say, "What's with him? Is he trying to, show us something or what?" It's completely much more appropriate then for you to drink a lot and eat a lot and make a lot of noise to celebrate your sister's wedding. So it's not a matter of hanging out in one place. You have to actually be alive, be conscious, and think about or react from some calm place that doesn't identify with any ideology but is ready and willing to see what's under your nose. Suzuki Roshi said, "This is why Zen practice emphasizes everyday life rather than some particular state of mind. We should find the reality in every moment. We should not attach to love alone. We should accept hate." A student of mine at Zen Center, a woman in the latter part of life, she has 2 grown children, a boy and a girl. And last Christmas, she made plane arrangements to go see her daughter, who is on the East Coast. And she decided not to see her son, who's over there somewhere, but in a different state in the East. She decided not to see him because he is undergoing a very acrimonious divorce, and there's a child involved, and so there's just a lot of emotional difficulty, and she thought she would be a burden to the family. They haven't actually moved into different, houses yet or whatever. So just a lot of tension, and she didn't want to add to this. But her son called her up after he heard about her plans to visit her daughter, and he just started screaming at her. "You've always favored her. You just won't come to me in my time of need. This is terrible. I'm sure he treated like a second-class son," just shouting at her. Well, her reaction, she felt so angry at him because she understood that he was just venting. None of it. He doesn't even believe this stuff, or at least she thought that he probably didn't. She hadn't favored her daughter when she was a mother. But she heard the anger. And in a funny way, she didn't take it personally. She understood that she was just the only person he could vent on in that moment. She heard what was behind the anger, the need, the disappointment, the fury. So she decided to go to his place. And she, at Christmas time, it's very hard to change your plane reservations. And she went through that. She paid the extra money. She did what was necessary to go see him as well. And when she told him that she was coming, he just started crying with gratitude. He said, "Oh, thank you, thank you." The next day, he called her up and said, "This is not a good time for you." But he felt very good about the fact that he made the whole plane change and all that. He just was so grateful to her that she accommodated him. So we can't just accept love. We have to accept hate when it comes our way, and to accommodate it and be responsive to the person who feels that way. A student gave me a book called Head Off Stress, because of this portion that I'm going to read to you, by D.E. Harding. And he describes with great admiration how Mother Teresa, how effective she was in her heartbreaking work. He says, Mother Teresa was not delicately picking her way along some middle path between the extremes of being emotionally affected by human catastrophe and settling in her inner peace. Not some sensible compromise between those. No. She made for both extremes at once with energy and dedication. And in practice, solved the problem of being really effective in doing what has to be done. She took on joyously the most appalling of human tragedies because her central peace remained undisturbed. She solved the problem of being surrounded by unbearable suffering by immersion in it, by being it absolutely and not being it absolutely. It's not a case of balancing one thing against the other, of compromise or moderation, but of extremism. Now, Harding uses the word extremism here to make a point, but actually we're talking about paradox when we talk about this. The recognition of two seemingly disparate points, but are actually the same thing. In this case, Mother Teresa's ability to be immersed in her work. Now, if you practice Zen for a while, and it may be in other, like Vipassana, other forms too, you may think that balance is the thing. I mean, it does look that way for a while, maybe 10 years or so. But it's not so. It really goes against our grain to apprehend how necessary it is to believe in nothing, to be ready to see whatever presents itself to you without an a priori agenda. So where do you abide if there are no hard and fast rules, no midway points between extremes, any extreme you can think of, to cling to? No ideal that you can embrace that doesn't immediately turn to sand, or worse, into a rigid stance that prevents you from shifting gears in a difficult situation. Zen Master Muman said, "No place can be found in which to put one's original face." No place can be found in which to put one's original face. It's no place. So where exactly is your original face? And how do you do nowhere standing? Suzuki Roshi. The important thing in our understanding is to have a smooth, free-thinking way of observation. We have to think and observe things without stagnation. We should accept things as they are without difficulty. Our mind should be soft and open to understand things as they are. At first, it's very difficult to accept things as they are. No kidding. When you can do everything, whether it's good or bad, without disturbance or annoyance, then form is form and emptiness is emptiness. There's no duality. Trying to be free from the suffering of duality is helpful, but not perfect practice. That's when you're trying to empty your mind. See, you're caught here. How do you get soft without emptying your mind? When Buddha comes to you, knowing that your life is short, enjoy it every day. When Buddha comes, you welcome him. When the devil comes, you welcome him. I have a student, another student, who's a married woman, and she married her husband when she was young. She's in her 40s now. And while she maintains, she said to me that this is the husband that she wants. I mean, she doesn't want to divorce him or anything, but she spent most of their married life trying to change him. I mean, he didn't quite fit in a lot of ways what she wanted in a husband. And one of these ways is that a woman wants a man to be romantic. He wants her to court her, give her gifts, and appreciate her. This is very widespread. So at the time I met her, she was at the point where she already could see that she was not going to change him. So she was stuck in a very uncomfortable place, which was that she was very critical of him all the time. And she didn't keep this to herself. I mean, and also maybe she shouldn't keep it to herself. In fact, not keeping it to herself is how she got convinced that she wasn't going to change him. And she said to me, the first time I ever saw her privately, she said, I think my husband is a wonderful person, but I just can't help criticizing him. And it's like some, compulsive habit that I have. And I said, well, if you really believe it's a compulsive habit that you don't need or want, you can change it. Just like you quit biting your nails or something. And she said, all right, I will try. So then we discussed strategies, right? And, at various times over the years, she came with a difference, saying this strategy, it seems like it doesn't work so well. It seems like I could do this or that. So over the years, she did change her habit of constantly criticizing her husband. And of course, when you do things like that, it's much bigger than it looks like it's going to be. I mean, just changing this behavior allowed all sorts of other things to arise. With the upshot of this story being that a couple of weeks ago she came to me and she showed me this new diamond ring that she had. And she said, my husband gave me this diamond ring. I didn't nag him for it. I haven't nagged him for it for years. In fact, he gave it to me because he said, thank you for not nagging me anymore. And then she said, but you know what? I'm completely unattached to it. Would you like to wear it? You just can't tell what's going to happen. Now, most of us have really hard political stances. We just finished an election. The less said about that itself, the better. But most of us, as individuals, have really hard political stances that are impervious to other points of view. We think that our point of view is the basic, natural point of view for any sensible human to have. So this is an arena in which people have a very hard time looking past their own opinions. For instance, if you're pro-life, let's say, and you feel passionately that people are murdering innocent children when they have abortions, it's very hard for you to consider all the data, all the things we know about what happens to neglected and unwanted children. And if you're pro-choice, it's very hard for you to admit that you have murdered a living thing when you have an abortion, even though there was very good reason for it, even though you can't possibly provide for a child what allows a child to flourish. And both groups seem incapable of viewing each other as human beings with different points of view. pro-lifers see pro-choicers as degenerates, and pro-lifers see pro-choicers as idiots. And so how extraordinary it is, then, if any person can hold a point of view strongly and passionately, and many points of view need to be supported strongly and passionately. But it's very unusual for a person to hold a point of view like that and not vilify the person that holds a different point of view. And I have a friend, a very close friend. We practiced for several decades at Zen Center, and then she moved to Spokane, which is Christian territory. And since she came from New York originally, she didn't heed my warnings. I grew up in Ohio. I knew this scene. I would never move to Spokane. She moved there because she didn't realize what this is like to live in a Christian community. I mean, and I don't mean to say that Christianity itself is a bad thing, but often in communities that aren't very wide, are not inclusive, you can get very disturbing behaviors. For instance, she moved into her house. She was a student of Suzuki Roshi. She continued to practice Buddhism. She moved into a house and decorated it with Tibetan prayer flags and things like that. And right next to her lived a very fundamentalist Christian family, a young wife and husband with 3 small children. And since she didn't have any grandchildren of her own, she took to these kids. And she used to invite them and want to take them places, but their parents for some time wouldn't let them go in her house because she had various prints, and sculpture of naked women. And they wouldn't let her take the children to like a circus or anything, because what do they know what she's really doing with their kids? But, after a while they got to know her and trust her, and a very good friendship grew up, so much so that when she invited me there to do retreats, and I took my grandson played with these children, and the woman came over and said, "Oh, I'm into magnets now, and since you have arthritis, would you like to sleep on the magnet?" Very friendly. So, and whenever we're picnicking in the backyard, they come over and blah, blah. So anyway, there was a anti-abortion demonstration in Spokane, and I forget the context, but my Buddhist friend went there on the side of the pro-choice people. And so right across from the police line, there were the pro-lifer people, and everybody was carrying signs and shouting at each other, especially on this perimeter, shouting at each other like that across the line. Well, my friend, who was in the pro-choice faction, looked across and she saw her Christian neighbors there with their children. So she crossed the police line, and everybody was agog, and she crossed it. "Hi, how are you? I wondered where you were this morning. I didn't see your car in the driveway, blah, blah, blah. Hello, blah, blah. Oh, how are you? How are you?" Everybody around them was totally stunned in silence. This little crowd just on both the pro-choice and the pro-life side. This can't be happening. So then after she said her hello, she went back to the pro-choice and picked up her sign and started screaming again. So this is extraordinary. And I have no idea. We have no data, but I wonder how it affected the people who actually saw this. Suzuki Roshi said, let's see how we're doing. Oh, dear. It's always the case. Suzuki Roshi said, as long as you have some fixed idea or are caught by some habitual way of doing things, you can't appreciate things in their true sense. We have to forget everything in our mind and discover something quite new and different, moment after moment. Our way is not always to go in one direction. Now, I have another friend who grew up in New York. I know everybody. Or maybe everybody from New York moved here. So anyway, we were talking about our old political days. And she started telling me, I said, things I said, I really, things have changed a little bit in how I look at things. I'm wide or blah, blah, blah. She said, let me tell you a story. She said, I was wide even then. She said, I was out demonstrating against the Vietnam War in New York City, and the police came to put us into vans and take us to the station house to be arrested. And she said, we all had the training, we all went limp, and they had to drag us to the vans. And she said, the policeman who was dragging me said to his companion, this is killing my back. So she said to him, you have a bad back? And she got up and walked to the van. So the policeman was blown away. He spent the next 10 minutes sitting in the van with her, telling her how much he hated to do this work. So I think maybe the basis for our actions, if we don't cling to a particular stance, is something like love. Not love as opposed to hate, but something like openness, a willingness to let a little fresh air in, fumigate our opinions, our prejudices. The important thing is that we suspend the judgments we have, allowing ourselves to be in direct contact with the stuff of experience. We can suspend our judgments without suppressing them or expressing them. We can have them there and know they're there, but choose to embrace life. This is appreciating the emptiness of our conceptions. This is true emptiness, not trying to, I can't think that, I can't think that. This is true emptiness, suspending judgment while embracing life. We have this ability to suspend our judgments when love calls. And I'll tell you another story. This same friend who crossed the anti-abortion line, last summer, I was ordained recently, a year or two ago. I can't remember, but I'm not good with time. But she, at the time, said, this is disgusting. Here you practice all these years without any robes or extra stuff, and then you, at the last minute, you completely desert and go into this corrupt priesthood, this patriarchy, this disgusting hierarchy, this, blah, blah. And I said, I'm very sorry. But anyway, actually, I backpedaled quite a bit and told her what had happened. But anyway, she and I were going to Tassajara last summer to give a workshop together. So I said, you know that you'll have to put my robes on for me for Zazen because I have arthritis and these robes are very heavy. So at Zen Center, in the morning, someone comes to my house and helps me put on the robes and then we go together. So I said to her, since we're going to be in the same cabin, you will have to put my robes on. She said, I will not do this. This is disgusting. You can go in your nightgown or whatever. So we went to Tassajara together, and, we had our usual good time getting there, stopping it here and there. So anyway, the time came, we put away our stuff and, packed it away and put our beds, made our beds. Everything was ready to go. And so I said, and the Hans started going for Zazen. So I said, Daya, would you please put on my robes now? And she said, that is disgusting, blah, blah, blah. I hate that you did this all the while putting on my robes with such gentleness and love. And since she was married to a priest for many years and has worn the sitting robe for herself many years, she knew just how to make the three colors of white, gray, and black, show, and just the kind of knot to make in the robe, all that. and going on and on while she's dressing me. And then as we started out the door together for Zazen, she said, "You make me do terrible things." You know, you say in your case it wasn't a choice, but actually you could have held on to those differences too till the bitter end and parted in a much different way. You know, some of us are lucky enough, like this woman with the diamond ring, to decide to give up an idea to communicate with someone before they die. But, you know, I emphasize this point, of course, because we tend to have the strong opinions. Of course, there's the other side, like, when do we muster strong opinions and fight for what we believe in? We do that when the fight is right, when we feel it's appropriate, when we have righteous anger about things, and we support the things we believe in with kindness. You know, it's very, very possible to work in a campaign headquarters, you know, and talk to people all day on the phone and, you know, argue with them and talk to them, and then somebody comes in with a different point of view and be completely kind and inclusive. All you have to do is not be identified with anything, not completely believe in anything. From your point of view, you see what would help the world, and you help that. You support those causes. But that's ultimately your opinion. My opinion. Each of our opinions. Sometimes world peace might be a controversial thing. Saving the earth might be a controversial thing. Or saving the human race could certainly be a controversial thing, because saving the earth and saving the human race might be at odds. You know, you can always shift around, look at the crystal from all different points of view. I thank you very much. Do we all just get up and leave? Or?
You take us out for drinks.
No, you take me out. I'd love to come.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.